You've always played sexy roles.
Oh, thank God.
Oh, you're right. Always sexy. And, but then, what happened?
I haven't always played sexy roles. I have played nuns, and I have played mother superiors, where...
She was in movies with Elvis and Jerry Lewis. She lived in a fancy Beverly Hills home. But Stella Stevens died broke. Why? Playboy tricked her and used her photos for 15 years without paying. Hollywood bosses made her take roles she hated. When she got sick with Alzheimer's, she couldn't even afford care. She had to sell her home of 50 years for pennies. Even after she died, Hollywood forgot to honor her at the Oscars. Now her son is telling the truth about how Playboy and Hollywood stole everything from her. Stella Stevens was born Estelle Caro Eggleston on October 1st, 1938, in Yazoo City, Mississippi. She was the only child of Thomas Elliott Eggleston, an insurance salesman, and Estelle Dovey Caro Eggleston, a nurse. When she was 4, her family moved to Memphis, Tennessee. The small-town life of Yazoo City was behind her as she stepped into a city that moved faster and felt bigger. She lived on Carrington Road near Highland Street and attended St. Anne's Catholic School before transferring to Sacred Heart School. By 1955, she had graduated from Memphis Evening School at Memphis Technical High School. Her family history had an unexpected connection to the past. One of her great-grandfathers, Henry Clay Tyler, was a Boston jeweler who had installed the clock in the Yazoo City courthouse cupola. It wasn't a fortune or fame that ran in the family, but a small mark in history that made her roots feel a little more unique. Her dream of becoming an actress started the moment she saw La Strada. Giulietta Messina's performance was unlike anything she had ever seen. She moved between laughter and heartbreak, without speaking a word. That kind of storytelling fascinated Stella, and from that moment, she knew what she wanted to do. But life had other plans first. On December 3, 1954, at just 16, she married Noble Herman Stevens, an electrician. Less than a year later, on June 10, 1955, she gave birth to their only child, Andrew Stevens. The marriage didn't last. By 1957, it was over. What followed was a painful custody battle. Both accused each other of kidnapping their son, turning the separation into something far more difficult. Stella eventually won full custody, but the fight left her emotionally and financially drained. She was 19, divorced, and raising a child on her own. Her dream of acting wasn't just a fantasy anymore. It was her way out, and she was ready to chase it. Stella Stevens' journey to Hollywood started while she was a student at Memphis State University. At just 19, she was balancing her studies with raising her young son after a divorce. Everything changed when she performed in a school production of Bus Stop. She played Cherie, an aspiring nightclub singer, and the local press took notice. The Memphis Press Scimitar praised her talent, and that recognition gave her the confidence to pursue acting professionally. Encouraged by the response, she made a bold move to Los Angeles. In 1959, she signed a contract with 20th Century Fox. It only lasted 6 months, but it was enough to get her started. That same year, she made her Hollywood debut in Say One for Me, a musical comedy starring Bing Crosby and Debbie Reynolds. Her role as a chorus girl was small, but she stood out. The industry took notice, and she won a Golden Globe for Most Promising Newcomer, sharing the honor with Tuesday Weld and Angie Dickinson. With that momentum, Stevens signed with Paramount Pictures. Later in 1959, she played Appassionata von Climax in Lil Abner, a role that showed off her mix of comedy and glamour. Audiences loved her. Hollywood now saw her as a rising star, but it also started shaping her image in a way she couldn't fully control. In January 1960, at just 21, she posed as Playboy's Playmate of the Month. The decision wasn't easy. As a single mother struggling financially, she needed the money. Playboy offered her $5,000, a significant amount at the time, but she later revealed she was only paid half up front. The rest came with strings attached. Hugh Hefner wanted her to work as a hostess at Playboy parties. She refused, which led to tensions with the magazine. The photos boosted her fame, but they also led to typecasting. Studios saw her as a sex symbol first and an actress second. Despite the challenges, Stevens kept moving forward. In 1962, she starred opposite Elvis Presley in Girls as Robin Gantner, a nightclub singer. The film was a box office hit, and her chemistry with Presley was undeniable. But behind the scenes, Stevens wasn't happy. She wanted more serious roles, and this wasn't the kind of film she had hoped for. Still, it cemented her status as one of Hollywood's most recognizable actresses. Even as Hollywood tried to put her in a box, she worked hard to show her range. She took on more dramatic roles, including Too Late Blues in 1961, a film directed by John Cassavetes. She had the talent to do more than just play love interests, and she proved it time and time again. Hollywood may have tried to define her, but Stevens was determined to write her own story. Her breakthrough came in 1963 when she starred in The Nutty Professor. Playing Stella Purdy, the intelligent and confident love interest of Jerry Lewis's character, she added warmth and charm to the film's comedic chaos. The movie was a modern take on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, with Lewis playing the awkward Professor Julius Kelp, who transforms into the arrogant and smooth-talking Buddy Love. Stevens's performance balanced the wild energy of Lewis, making her character feel real and grounded. Audiences loved her, and critics praised the way she held her own in a film dominated by one of comedy's biggest stars. The film became a huge success. It wasn't just popular at the time, it became a classic. In 2004, it was chosen for preservation in the National Film Registry, recognized as an important part of American cinema. Off-screen, things were not as smooth. Stevens reportedly had a complicated relationship with Lewis, with rumors of an affair between them during filming. Whether true or not, their chemistry on screen was undeniable. The film's influence lasted for decades, inspiring Eddie Murphy's 1996 remake. But Stevens's performance in the original remained unmatched. After The Nutty Professor, Stevens proved she wasn't limited to comedy. In 1966, she starred in The Silencers, a James Bond-style spy spoof alongside Dean Martin. She played Gail Hendricks, a role that let her mix humor with glamour, showing off her playful side. Then in 1972, she took on something completely different. The Poseidon Adventure was one of the biggest disaster films of the era, telling the story of a luxury cruise ship that capsizes, forcing passengers to fight for survival. Stevens played Linda Rogo, a former prostitute married to Ernest Borgnine's tough-talking character. In a film filled with suspense and high-stakes drama, she gave her character depth and strength, making Linda one of the most memorable figures in the story. The film was a massive box office hit and earned multiple Academy Award nominations. By the 1970s and 1980s, she had become a familiar presence on television. She starred as Lute Mae Sanders in Flamingo Road, a primetime soap opera that aired from 1981 to 1982. Playing a savvy bar owner with a complicated past, she brought depth to the character across 34 episodes, making her one of the show's standout figures. Beyond that, she made guest appearances on some of the biggest TV hits of the time, including Bonanza, The Love Boat, and Murder, she wrote. On The Love Boat, she played different characters in multiple episodes, each role letting her showcase a new side of her talent. Even as the years went on, she kept working. She appeared in Magnum P.I. Highlander, the series, and General Hospital, proving her ability to stay relevant in an ever-changing industry. But acting wasn't her only passion. At a time when female directors were rare in Hollywood, she stepped behind the camera. In 1989, she directed The Ranch, an independent film about women working at a Nevada ranch, focusing on themes of survival and resilience. The film didn't get a wide release, but it showed her determination to tell meaningful stories. A decade earlier, she had worked on The American Heroine, a 1979 documentary about the role of women in American history. She was always drawn to projects that highlighted strong women, whether in front of the camera or behind it. She also co-wrote scripts and pursued ambitious projects like Hard Ride, a Western-themed trilogy. Hollywood wasn't always welcoming to female filmmakers, but Stevens refused to let that stop her. In the 1980s, Stella Stevens took on a bold theatrical challenge. She starred as Oscar Madison in a touring production of an all-female version of The Odd Couple. Sandy Dennis played Florence Ungar, the overly neat and anxious roommate. This fresh take on Neil Simon's classic comedy reimagined the famous mismatched duo as women, adding a new perspective to the story. For Stevens, it was a chance to prove her comedic talent in a way that felt different from her work in film and television. Oscar was messy, carefree, and rough around the edges, the complete opposite of Florence. Playing this role gave her the freedom to fully embrace physical comedy and fast-paced dialogue in front of a live audience. The production stood out as an inventive spin on a well-loved play, and Stevens made the role her own. A decade earlier, she had stepped behind the camera for the first time. In 1979, she made her directorial debut with The American Heroine, a documentary about women's changing roles in society. The film explored their struggles and achievements in different fields, showing how expectations were shifting. Stevens didn't just direct it. She also produced and shaped the project herself, proving she had more to offer than just acting. The documentary didn't become a major hit, but it was a turning point for her. After years of playing characters written by others, she was now in control of the story. Her choice to focus on women's lives reflected a deep interest in issues of empowerment and equality. In 1989, she returned to directing with The Ranch, a feature film that mixed comedy with themes of resilience and reinvention. The story followed a cowboy, played by Gary Fjellgaard, who helped a struggling executive transform a rundown ranch into a rustic health spa. That executive was played by Stevens' son, Andrew Stevens, making the project a personal one for her. The film had a light-hearted tone, balancing humor with moments of genuine warmth. It wasn't a mainstream hit, but it showed her ability to bring a heartfelt story to life. Working with her son added an extra layer of meaning, making it more than just another directing job. In 1999, she tried something completely new. She co-wrote a novel called Razzle Dazzle with William Hegner. The book followed the rise and fall of Johnny Galt, a rock and roll star whose energy and stage presence sent fans into a frenzy. Born in Memphis, Johnny had all the charm and swagger of a classic music icon, but fame came with its own dangers. Readers couldn't help but notice the similarities to Elvis Presley. The novel wasn't just about one man, though. It explored the pressures of celebrity life, the way the entertainment industry could build someone up and break them down, and the struggle between success and personal happiness. For Stevens, this was another step in her creative journey. After years in Hollywood, she had seen both the glamour and the hardships that came with fame. Writing Razzle Dazzle gave her the chance to tell a story that felt close to home. Stella Stevens lived a life filled with Hollywood glamour, but behind the scenes, she faced heartbreak, family estrangement, and personal struggles that shaped her journey. She grew up in a conservative home where dreams of stardom had no place. Her big break came in 1960 when she posed for Playboy as Playmate of the Month. The exposure helped launch her acting career, but it also led to painful consequences. Her family, still deeply rooted in Memphis, Tennessee, saw her decision as a betrayal of their values. Local newspapers called it a mistake, and her mother reportedly hoped she would fail in Hollywood and return home. Instead, Stella pushed forward, landing roles in major films like The Nutty Professor in 1963 and The Poseidon Adventure in 1972. But the damage to her family ties was permanent. She was practically disowned and never fully mended the relationship. Stella's love life was just as complex. Her first marriage ended in divorce, and though she had relationships over the years, the most enduring was with rock guitarist Bob Kulick. They met in 1983 and stayed together for nearly 4 decades. They lived in Beverly Hills for years until Stella's health started to decline. When she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2015, everything changed. Kulick found it painful to watch the woman he loved lose her independence. In 2016, as her condition worsened, she moved into an assisted living facility. Kulick visited her often, but friends noticed how much he struggled emotionally. One of the biggest challenges of her life was the custody battle for her son, Andrew Stevens. The fight took place in Tennessee and quickly became a financial and emotional burden. Courts at the time did not look favorably on Hollywood lifestyles, and her opponents used that against her. They argued that the entertainment industry was no place to raise a child, and their case was made even stronger by her 1960 Playboy photo shoot. While she stood by her decision to pose, conservative critics saw it as proof that she was unfit for motherhood. The legal battle stretched on, and her earnings were drained by lawyer fees. She had no choice but to make sacrifices in her career just to keep fighting for her son. Money was already a problem, and the Playboy deal did not help as much as she had hoped. In January 1960, Stella Stevens became Playboy's Playmate of the Month. She was a young actress trying to make a name for herself while raising a child on her own. Money was tight, and when a photographer and his wife approached her with an offer, she saw it as a way to stay afloat. They promised her $5,000 for a photo shoot with Playboy. The feature, called Dog Patch Playmate, played off her role in Lil Abner. It seemed like an easy job, but things didn't turn out the way she expected. After the shoot, Hugh Hefner told her she would only receive half of the money. To get the rest, she had to work as a hostess at one of his clubs. She refused. The experience left her angry, but her connection to Playboy wasn't over. The magazine featured her again in 1965 and 1968. The exposure made her a recognizable face, yet it also created an image she struggled to control. By the mid-1960s, she was one of the most photographed women in the world. Playboy ranked her 27th in their list of the 100 sexiest stars of the 20th century. The attention helped her in some ways. It put her name in front of millions, and as she once told the New York Times, if even half of those people remembered her, they might buy tickets to her movies. But there was a downside. Hollywood now saw her as a sex pot. Directors hesitated to cast her in serious roles. She wanted to prove herself as an actress, but the industry had already made up its mind. By 1974, her frustration reached its peak. She sued Hugh Hefner and Playboy Enterprises for $7 million. The lawsuit accused the magazine of invading her privacy and using nude photos without her consent over a span of 15 years. She claimed these images damaged her career, costing her roles and reducing her to a one-dimensional image. She was especially furious over a picture published in the November 1973 issue of Playboy. It showed her on a couch with her eyes crossed and her tongue sticking out. She called it humiliating. The case dragged on for 2 years, but on June 14, 1976, it was dismissed. The judge ruled that she had filed too late. The deadline had already passed by just 2 weeks. The lawsuit was over, but her resentment never faded. Years later, she still spoke about the damage Playboy had done to her career. She felt trapped by an image that was never fully her choice, yet the magazine continued to claim her as part of its history. In 1998, they once again named her one of the sexiest women of the century. It was recognition, but not the kind she had wanted. Looking back, she summed up the experience in a way that said it all. People don't realize how horrible men can be toward a beautiful woman with no clothes on. But those were not the only struggles for Stella. In the 1960s, Hollywood studios controlled nearly every aspect of an actor's career. Stevens signed contracts with Paramount and Columbia Pictures, two of the biggest studios of the era. These contracts locked her into roles she did not always want, but had no choice but to accept. When Paramount cast her in Girls, Girls, Girls! In 1962, she tried to refuse. She thought the script was weak and did not want to star alongside Elvis Presley. The studio gave her an ultimatum: do the film or be suspended. She reluctantly agreed, but only after they promised her a future role with Montgomery Clift. That promise was never kept. Despite being one of the most photographed women of the 1960s, Stevens struggled to turn her fame into financial stability. Columbia Pictures often cast her in seductive or glamorous roles, making it difficult for her to prove herself as a serious actress. She had the talent to do more, but the system cared more about profit than creative growth. Her career was stuck in a cycle, and breaking free was nearly impossible. Some of her biggest career setbacks came from choices she made herself. One of the most painful was turning down the role of Hot Lips Houlihan on MASH. The series premiered in 1972 and became one of the most successful television shows of all time, running until 1983. The role instead went to Loretta Swit, who turned it into one of the most beloved characters in TV history. Stevens had chosen to focus on film instead of television, but in hindsight, it was a decision that cost her both financial security and long-term recognition. Later in life, she admitted regretting the missed opportunity. Had she taken the part, it could have given her steady income and career stability at a time when her film offers were slowing down. Instead, she found herself in smaller projects that never brought back the level of fame she once had. By the 1970s, she started looking for ways to secure her future outside of Hollywood. She purchased land near Carlton, Washington, and opened an art gallery and bakery in Twisp. She also moved to a 27-acre ranch, hoping to build a life away from the pressures of the entertainment industry. But while the change may have given her peace of mind, the businesses were not financially successful. Stella Stevens was at the height of her career when she bought her home in Beverly Hills in 1965. She chose a property in the exclusive Beverly Crest neighborhood, a place that reflected both her success and her personal style. The house had been built just a few years earlier in 1962, designed in the sleek mid-century modern style that was popular at the time. It had 2,806 square feet of space, 4 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms. The living room had a fireplace, and the family room featured a bar. There were details that made it unique, like custom hand-painted murals and stained glass windows that showed her appreciation for art. Outside, a free-form swimming pool made the backyard feel like a private retreat. She lived there for more than 50 years, but by 2016, everything had changed. The house was no longer the glamorous home it had once been. It had aged, and so had she. Financial struggles were becoming unavoidable, and the cost of medical care was rising. She had been battling Alzheimer's disease, and she needed money to afford long-term care. The house went on the market as a fixer-upper and was sold as is for $1.25 million. Despite being in Beverly Hills, the price reflected its condition. Her longtime partner, Bob Kulick, helped manage the sale before she moved into an assisted living facility. After more than 5 decades in the home, it was a painful but necessary decision. Long before she was forced to sell her Beverly Hills home, she had tried to find a different kind of life. In 1976, she bought a 27-acre ranch near Carlton, Washington, in the Methau Valley. It was an escape from Hollywood, a way to live free from the expectations that came with being a celebrity. She poured time and money into making it her own. She restored a historic 1901 homestead cabin, renovated another old house on the property, and even opened a small art gallery and bakery in the nearby town of Twisp. For a while, it seemed like the perfect place. She loved the simplicity, the space, and the independence. But keeping up with the ranch was expensive, and by 1983, it was clear that the costs were too high. The dream of a permanent retreat in the mountains wasn't possible. She sold the ranch for $265,000, far less than what she had invested over the years. It was a difficult loss, but she had no choice. The financial strain forced her to leave behind the life she had tried to build. When she sold her Beverly Hills home decades later, it was not to fund a new adventure, but to cover medical expenses. By the 2010s, the cost of Alzheimer's care had become overwhelming. The $1.25 million from the sale went toward securing a place for her in an assisted living facility in Los Angeles. It was a harsh reality for someone who had once lived a life of success and glamour. Her longtime partner, Bob Kulick, a respected rock guitarist, stood by her side through much of her later years. He passed away in 2020, leaving behind a void that she carried with her. Despite the ups and downs in their relationship, her son, Andrew Stevens, remained a key part of her life. Her final years were tough. Alzheimer's took its toll, and medical bills mounted. The same industry that once celebrated her largely moved on. Still, she remained a symbol of resilience, a woman who refused to be defined by the roles she was given. When she passed on February 17, 2023, at the age of 84, the entertainment world took notice. Tributes poured in from those who had worked with her and those who had admired her from afar. But the controversy over her exclusion from the Oscars memorial segment left many outraged. It was a painful reminder of how Hollywood often forgets its own. But Andrew wasn't about to let her legacy disappear. In 2024, he released Stella Stevens, The Last Starlet, a 99-minute documentary that delves into the truth of his mother's life. More than just a tribute, it's an intimate look at the woman behind the glamorous image. Andrew, an accomplished producer with over 190 films to his name, directed the film himself. It premiered at the Fort Lauderdale International Film Festival on November 13, 2024, bringing Stella's story back into the spotlight. The film doesn't shy away from the harsh realities Stella faced. It explores her rise to fame in an industry dominated by men, her fight for better roles, and her advocacy for women's rights, something that was often overlooked. It also reveals the sacrifices she made, from being a single mother early in her career to battling Alzheimer's disease in her later years. Andrew's motivation wasn't just personal. He was outraged when the Academy Awards left Stella out of the In Memoriam segment in 2023, despite her being an active member of the Academy for years. That moment fueled his determination to make sure Hollywood remembered her the right way. The documentary features interviews with those who admired her, rare footage that offers glimpses into her private world, and stories that go beyond the glamorous image she was often reduced to. The response has been overwhelmingly positive, with audiences and critics alike recognizing it as both a celebration of her achievements and an honest look at how Hollywood treats its female stars.